Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and as always, we have Rainier and Evan joining us as well. On this week's episode, we're going to be going over a list by Mike. Mike, I'm going to apologize for your last name. I'm going to say Donch, but I don't believe that's correct. As always, we like to mispronounce everybody's name because, we're just unable to pronounce them, to be honest with you. So we got a list review from Mike, and then we'll be going over Thranduil's Hall's list that we've written, and then so we'll go into those first. We'll go into Mike's list. So Mike has an Azog's Hunter / Azog's Legion army list, and basically if you're looking on screen, there's a little bit to read, but basically I'll go over it real quickly. He wanted to make try to make a competitive Azog's list for kind of like Hobbit era evil that isn't Goblin Town, basically. And so he's got, Azog with the stone flail, heavy armor, and white warg. He's got 4 Gundabad orcs with shield and spear, 1 Gundabad orc with banner, shield, and spear, 3 Gundabad warbats, 2 Gundabad berserkers with axe, and a troll brute. He also has Narzog with 11 hunter orcs with bow, hunter orc captain, 6 hunter orcs, 1 hunter orc with 2-handed pick, and 3 fell wargs. It's 800 points, 32 warriors, and 11 bows. He basically said that, he likes the 6 might with Master of Battle, 11 might at the start of the game. He should be getting 1 to 2 free might per turn, he's saying, and for at least 2 to 3 turns. And essentially, he's just trying to make as competitive as a Hobbit Evil era list as possible. One thing that we would consider is maybe dropping down the troll brute. And now part of his explanation basically says he likes the idea of the troll brute because it will give him another distraction. So he believes that the troll brute will do damage to the troops while Azog does damage to heroes or other troops. And so the opponent will have to pick their kind of poison, if they will. And the Gundabad warbats will help out with that, along with Azog being able to, hurl combat to help out the troll if it needs to. I think the only problem with the troll brute, and one of the reasons you don't really see him that often, is because he only gets the 1 strength 10. So if you screw that up, then he's not really moving anywhere. And also is the compel aspect, where I can compel your troll brute into your own forces. So then I'm causing damage on your own guys, and he doesn't get to move for that turn. So it's just one of those things where the troll brute, because he has no ability to resist anything, tends to not get taken. I understand where you were going with that, which was that, that dual threat thing. But I think I would downgrade the troll brute to maybe one of the Gundabad ogres, or maybe even upgrade it if you really wanted to maybe the Gundabad, what was it, the troll? Yeah, Gundabad troll. But I think the ogres, just for their points, are so good at what they do, because they move 8, and they are that fight 5 monster with 3 attacks for so cheap. I actually like the warbats, the amount of warbats that are in this, to be honest with you. Maybe boost up some berserkers as well. I'd like to see about 3 or 4 berserkers personally. But I would personally consider dropping Azog down to Bolg, just because you end up saving, I believe, if I'm correct, I think it's almost 70 points, 65 or something like that. So it's a lot of points that you could then use for another captain, like Thimble or something, and then maybe you could get, if you downgraded the Troll Brute, you could add another, 5 or 6 Hunter Orcs to that as well. I love the Fell Warg aspect of it. I always love adding a couple Fell Wargs because they are great for objectives or just, getting behind the line and causing trouble. I think you boost up the warriors in this, because the big thing with it is going to be dealing with the lack of numbers. Shooting's going to be a real issue. Even though you have a couple of shots yourself at 18 inches, 11, it'll do okay, not great, but you're probably in a lot of situations going to be going to your opponent, so you'll have a mostly defense 4 line. Maybe add you could add in a goblin mercenary captain, to bring a couple of them for a little, I guess what's the word, siege attack from the back, come in from behind and try to get on them. But I think because you can take more troops, I think I'd maybe consider just adding more troops and maybe getting up to like 37, 38 models. But I'll go over to Rainier first. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I can agree on a lot of your, but before I say anything, like I want to say that I've never played Gundabad. I played against it multiple times though, so that's where I guess my critiques will come. And I've played many armies against it. I think what Tim says when he says the war bats are key, I really, really like the war bats as well. And I feel like the war bats are the glue that brings together all of your thoughts on building this list. You talked about Azog being a headhunter. I like the ability that, yeah, he is that headhunter, and the war bats can just do whatever they want, destroy battle lines or anything, because they're going to focus on Azog. With Azog the hunter or Azog the war bats, the berserkers, and the troll brute, I can see where you're coming from when you think the troll brute isn't going to be, I guess, prioritized as much, because I do kind of see if someone prioritizes the troll brute, you'll have everything else to play with you. But to kind of like go off of what Tim says, I think the model count is really low for 800, and I only say that because having frequented many tournaments, you will come up against armies that are like 50 or 60 with shooting power, 40 to 50 with magic, 30 to 40 with like 3 or 4 mega heroes that can take out a lot. So that's why I say it's a little low, especially Tim alluded to it. The low defense of the hunter orcs is kind of going to be a problem. And as an opponent, when I'm looking at this, it's kind of like, okay, like I see some of those weak spots that someone would probably focus on. But yeah, I actually do like it. I don't know much about the flail. You ask if it's worth taking. I would say it's not worth taking. I think when it comes to Gundabad, you're counting points, as we're going to go over Mirkwood lists or Thranduil's Halls lists. It's the same thing. Like many things in these lists are expensive, and you want to get as much out of it as possible. So I would agree with Tim. You can either drop the flail, bring in some more berserkers, and then that'll spread out your threat even more. You could drop the flail, try to get in more models that are defense 6 into Azog's warband, because I think without the flail, Azog's still a beast of nature. He's not going to be stopped by anything. And yeah, your headhunter comment, like he's still going to be a headhunter. I'm a little conflicted with the brute, whether to get rid of him or not. I can say if he does a lot in the game, that's amazing. But if he doesn't do much in the game, that's going to really put you below, because he is a key aspect of the list. And I think he is kind of easy to mitigate as an opponent. So yeah, I don't know. I would probably, in my opinion, my play style, of course, also, I would go more towards Tim's route. Maybe add a mercenary captain warband with some mercs. Super cheat. You get 2 more might with heroic march. Heroic move-offs with that 2 might also. You get objectives with that. Or just go heavier with the model count in Azog's warband, get more Gundabad berserkers, and maybe even consider another warbat. But yeah, those are my things, is just kind of like balance it a little more, because when I see the troll brute, if it's mitigated, that does really put you behind, because your numbers are lower. And outside the troll brute, you have light armor, which can be not too good.
I want to just make sure, like, just before we move over to Evans, I would take the Songflow personally, just because he has Burly coming with it. So to get the +1 to wound is fantastic for troop killing.
How much points is it?
It's 10. So it's not.
It's just 10.
Oh, is it 20?
Points.
Maybe I misread it. Then I apologize. For 20.
So, it is kind of hard
because if we math this out for a sec, 20 points, you're getting
+1 to wound.
You're getting the ability to use it, which reduces your fight value from 7 to 6, which means you're never going to be using this against heroes, because not only is it just reduced to 6, it is permanently reduced to 6, meaning that you cannot strike afterwards.
That takes away the head.
Yeah, but it's but Evan, it's only when fighting with the stone flail.
Exactly.
I guess that's true. So you could switch it.
You
Only
can
to
use your
killing
mace. You can
troops.
switch to the mace and then B fight 7.
But what that means is that one, you're not going to use it against heroes. It's only against troops. And because Azog is mainly a hero hunter, he's not going to be using it against heroes. So those points are not wasted per se, but not that great. And even if you get into heroes, half of the flail is you cause D3 wounds, which is obviously useless against warriors. Yep. And you knock models prone, which isn't.
You already have.
You're already really doing that when you're charging in on the white warg. So really, what you're getting is the +1 to wound, and for 20 points, I wouldn't say that's worth it, especially seeing as you won't get it against heroes.
Knowing that it's 20 now, I think Azog's just one of those people where it's like, oh, well, if you could have strength 5 and +1 to wound, you'll always take that, right? But knowing how expensive he already is, and now knowing that that's 20 points, I mean, he already strength 5 with the white warg charging, so more than likely,
and that's four goblin. That's 4 goblin mercenaries right there. So you up 32 to 36, and if you make other, like say the troll brute, get him to an ogre or something, then you could bump it up, and then before you know it, you still have your headhunter, you still have bats doing like the Lord's work, and you still have what is it, like other monsters flying or running around doing stuff, but you're doing so at around 42 models, which makes Azog, I think, that much more dangerous, because then you don't have to like, oh shoot, I need to break them right before I break, because I'm going to break in 2 turns. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you had a suitable model count, say like 40-ish models, which is probably fine, and you had a decent defensive contingent that could effectively block archery from your more squishy hunter orcs, then I would say sure, put on the stone flail. It gives you +1 to wound in certain situations. You have the models, you have the power. Why not just throw it on for 20 points? But because you have 32 warriors in your 800-point army, and of those 32 warriors, you only got 32 models. Well, actually, did he say 32 warriors? So what would 30, the model
actually,
count
yeah,
be?
that's a good point. So it's 35.
So we've got
35 models.
11, 12, that's 23 plus 12, 35 models, which isn't as bad, but is still not ideal for the fact that you only have 5 gun-to-bat orcs with shields. That's your only defense 6 contingent. So I'd say, definitely work on dropping stuff down. Probably getting more gun-to-bat orcs is what I would recommend, just so you can basically line them up in front of your hunter orcs and use them as cover for your hunter orcs from shooting, because they're much harder to kill. They also work to concentrate your hitting power a bit more. A normal hunter orc fighting against a 2-rank shield wall is going to lose and die most of the time, right? Because a lot of armies have fight 4, they've got banners behind them, and so they're going to be out fighting, they're going to be winning the fight. And even strength 3, if you have 2 attacks, you have a 55% chance of killing a hunter orc. So they're really going to crumple unless you get unless you can surround the opponent, which isn't always the case, especially if you get outshot. So I'd say more gun-to-bat orcs with shields and spears. In order to get them, I'd say drop the troll brute, maybe down to an ogre, drop the stone flail. That gives you like 60-ish points. That's 6 extra gun-to-bat orcs. That brings you up to 11, which is a very good amount. And you can use them as spear supports. You can use them as a defensive wall. I think that'll give you a much more well-rounded army, and it brings your numbers up to 41, which is perfectly serviceable for 800 points.
Are you guys okay with 3 warbats though? Like, would you go to 2? Would you stick with 1? Are you happy with 3?
like 3, and this is why I'm going to go with 3, because I don't see where he's putting this, but I believe this is what his strategy is and how he would use it. Azog goes in with all the war bats and all the monsters. They create huge holes, and then the hunter orcs aren't fighting in the traditional battle line that you would that you would usually come up against. You know what I mean? This is where I think his thought is. And for that reason, I think the hunter orcs are really, really good in this list for such discounted price, for at least for how cheap they are. To have 2 attacks and strength 4, I think they're going to be killing stuff. But I do think if you do that, and I'm saying assuming you keep the 3 bats because you need to do that, you still have to bulk up the numbers, which I think is exactly what Evan, Tim, and myself are saying. Regardless of any route you go, drop some stuff to get the numbers up because you do need that. I think especially in the American scene or like just in general at 800 points. Yeah, I think you need that.
I wonder. I like the hunter or captain obviously for the march, makes sense.
Well, does he need it though? To be honest, Azog has 6 might. And
he does have
also
6
has
might.
heroic march.
Now, but okay, so I guess what my point is, okay, so are you team Azog or are you team Bolg in this situation?
I'm team Azog because when I go against Bolg, you can just shoot him off of his little warg, and Bolg starts with 3 might, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's
but
like
he'll get
Azog,
master of battle.
Yeah, that's true, but I feel like Azog, this is just my experience. When I come up against him, I am genuinely scared. You remember this, Tim, when you played the list, like that was the only thing in the list that I was like mortified of, because you just have no way to stop it. It's just, oh shoot, let me make sure Azog only kills 5 this turn instead of 5 and my hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
so I think
okay.
that's what makes this list scary. I could get where the argument can be because of course Bolg is cheaper too, but I just think Azog on the warg is like a beast.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this: would you rather, because the thing is, for anyone who doesn't know, I think we've talked about this on one episode, but if you didn't listen to that episode, you probably don't remember this. I had played Rainier at a tournament with it was all Azog's Legion at the time, but it was a bunch of Goblin mercenaries, Azog, Bolg, and 2 ogres, and so I had very similar numbers to Rainier. Or to Mike's list. I think I ended up having about 40. So it was close to the amount of numbers. Now, again, Goblin mercenaries move slower, so that makes sense. But I was marching every turn, and what ended up happening, really, I mean, it's different because obviously Rainier had played a Corsair army, but it was one of those things where, what was it? Turn 4, I lost. I didn't even get into combat. Right?
Yeah, I think you just got Azog into killing. Like
I got Azog killed 6 guys, I think, but the game was over by turn 4 because he just shot me all off the board. And it's always that point of, does Azog make 245 points up? Right? Bolg killed the same amount of people in that turn. I think Bolg killed a warband or half a warband. Azog killed half a warband, and my troops died off because of the shooting. The trolls got destroyed before the shooting. Like, I mean, it was a really good shooting, and it was against a very heavy shooting army. So that's something to consider. But I just wished when I made that list that I'd probably just stuck with Bolg, because I think with this kind of army, you have the ability to really bulk out your numbers and to have a bunch of 2 attack strength 4 models that if you were to back them up with Gundabads with spears, you go to 3 attacks all at strength 4, and the Gundabads will reroll 1s against elves and dwarves, and then you could feint in the front or stab in the front with the hunter orcs, so you could reroll to 1s on all 3 dice at strength 4. I like this list when it has high numbers, like mid 40s, close to 50s. I think the only way you do that is to go with maybe you go with Bolg and 2 ogres. That's your threats, right? You get 2 ogres to kind of go out wide and try to take things down. Bolg's in the middle, and obviously they'll be worried about magic, but you have to worry about that at any point with this list is the magic.
And then you'd say you keep the bats and the berserkers too,
I like
right?
the bats. I like the berserkers. I just want to see. I want to see at least close to mid 40s in this list for me to be like, actually, I like that. And for that to happen, Azog has to go down to Bolg. Because the real debate is, do you want Boromir in this list or do you want Aragorn, right? Because Bolg is kind of Aragorn and Boromir is Azog in that regard, right? Where Bolg has 3 might and the ability to technically get a free point of might per turn. And Azog is your Boromir with 6 straight up might, but he's expensive, of course. Now, obviously, Azog is better, but I just prefer to go with the Bolg route. But what do you guys
I think one thing to consider too, though, is the new, I guess, like ruling with Black Dart.
Oh yes, I have a story to tell about that. So yesterday, I played against an Azog's Legion list that had it was 650 points. He had like Bolg on Warg, and then some Hunter Orcs, and some Gundabad Orcs, and some Bats, the usual, and some mercenaries and a mercenary captain. And turn 1, Bolg got Black Darted off his work. So that will happen. So the Shadow Lord just went in, threw down 3 dice, succeeded, killed the Warg, and then that was that. And with Azog, that wouldn't have happened. But it's also good to remember that Azog, with all the stuff, with the Stone Flail, Heavy Armor, White Warg, he is 70 more points than Mounted Bolg, which is a very large amount of points. That is, you can fit Bolg and an Ogre in the same amount of points that you can fit Azog. And that gives you 2 threats. And I'm not necessarily saying that Bolg and an Ogre is better, because obviously, as I pointed out, Bolg can be neutralized much more easily than Azog can. But Azog is definitely a much more high risk, high reward model, because he can do a lot more damage. He's harder to kill in some ways, but in other ways, if he is taken out, you've lost more of your army. Say, if he gets hurled into, he's going to have big problems. Even though his Warg always sticks around, he's going to have a huge problem with that. If he runs out of will, say your opponent has multiple casters, he is completely useless, and he costs 250 points, which is more than Aragorn. So basically, think about your metagame. Think about what people are playing. And if they're playing casters and, I don't know, maybe even bigger heroes than Azog, like Gilgalads or something that can kill him, perhaps leave Azog at home and take Bolg instead.
Yeah, I like that. I think the gist of like our conversation with this is, with Gundabad, if you take a pure, you're going to have a lot of toys to play with, but you're going to have sacrifices to make, and you're going to have weaknesses with whatever decisions you make. But I think back to it, like, all of us agree that you got to bolster up the numbers to make it effective. I would say at an 800 point list to make it competitive.
Yeah. So, okay, here's what I'll ask. Do you believe, with adjustments to this list, it can be a top tier competitive army at tournaments if it were the right list made? Or is this faction just unable to deal with certain things and it just can't become that?
There are people who have been able to do very well with these types of lists. I've never seen anyone do very well with Azog, but I've seen people do quite well with these type of Green Alliance, with Azog's Legion and Azog's Hunters and whatnot. There are just some matchups that they'll really suffer against. Obviously, Corsairs is a big one. They're Fight 4, they've got tons of shooting, and they'll kill a lot of guys. And it's really bad in that way. Other matchups can also be really problematic. But it can do well. So
yeah. I think this list has the potential, or the army itself has the potential to be like really, really good and be extremely competitive. I think just the problem is some of the models are $100 a piece.
Well, yeah.
So I think not everybody plays this, but we talk about the weaknesses, but the strengths are huge. When the strengths click, they click. And we've seen top players like Will Champion play Hunter Orcs, just Hunter Orcs and win with Hunter Orcs. Like these type of lists here, if you modify, are more balanced than just pure Hunter Orcs, in my opinion, and can potentially go even further. So I think it's all, of course, it has to do with the player. But I think if this army was cheaper, you would see it played a lot more by many people. And I just don't see that many, I guess, top competitive players gravitating towards it for some odd reason, because the models are gorgeous. It's really cool. Just makes me assume it's the cost. But like, yeah, I think this would be really, really competitive. Just going over this list, I'm like, oh, seeing the different like things you could do and play with it. I think it can be very
It's interesting that you bring that up though, because that the cost might be a reason why this doesn't do that well. The only thing I'll say as a consideration, right? Laketown is an expensive army, right? And it's not as expensive as this army, but people always take that, right? Just because they know it's competitive. So do you think that because it's too high, people won't take it, or if it's competitive, they would take it?
I think Laketown is taken more because it's semi-broken. And I say that, yeah, like I honestly mean that, with like you have baskets for shields and like cloths for armor, and they're D5. And you could basically ally in anything to fix any hole. I think that's
the
kind of
allies,
isn't
it, right?
Yeah,
Laketown
is more versatile and more proven to be good, right? Like if someone takes Laketown, you're like, okay, if they're taking Laketown, it's probably going to be a good list, right? With this, it's like, all right, if I do what I want to do, which is to take the big heroes and spam the monsters, my list is going to be really small and they're all going to die. So with this list, you need to structure it very carefully. And you need to fork out a lot of money for it. With Laketown, sure, you're going to be forking out a lot of money for it, but you know that it's going to give you a return on your investment, basically.
Yeah, and it's back to the whole glass cannon. Evil armies are glass cannons. I think this is a huge glass hammer.
It is, absolutely.
In the sense that it's like Laketown's forgiving. You have 60 models or something. Gandalf doesn't do much. He still has blinding light. Bard doesn't do much. He's still shooting. This, every single like piece of it has to work perfectly to get your like worth of it when it comes to the game. So exactly what Evan's saying, like Laketown's proven, like it's proven to work. This isn't, because it is back to the whole evil factions can't ally in to fix anything, and some evil factions are like just glass cannons. In this case, a glass hammer. A mistake is a huge mistake. Like this list actually kind of reminds me of I have no idea why, but it reminds me of Fell Beast armies, because like if you don't get your money's worth with a Fell Beast, you're kind of screwed. Same with I feel Gundabad. So yeah.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, like Evan said, that you don't see many people. The only point, Rainier made this point as well. The only people I know of who have done exceptionally well at tournaments with this type of army are Will, that we spoke to on the podcast, and Evan, your dad, I think, won with that Berserker list, right, at Nova? Did he win it, or did he finish top 4?
He came 4th with that Signal Tower list.
Yeah, so he took, for anyone who, I mean, we've mentioned it on a bunch of episodes, but if you haven't heard, Matt, who's on the podcast regularly, he took the Signal Tower, Azog, and I think it was around 20 Berserkers to Nova. And for anyone who doesn't know Nova, it's like the US's version of the Super Bowl for.
It's like North America's like biggest tournament.
It's North America's biggest tournament, right? And he actually finished 4th with it, which at the time when this came out, nobody, even thought about the Signal Tower kind of a thing, and so he did really well with it. So it's proven if you understand the army, if you know how to play and figure it out, you can do well with it.
Yeah, there's other players like Avery who play it, and Avery does pretty good. I never see him ranking like bottom table, but I just
everything's got to work. It's like you said, it's a great, it's a really big glass
cannon or glass hammer. Like it's all got to click.
Okay, Mike, let us know if you change the list at all, if you take anything into consideration. Do let us know if you take this to a tournament, though. I'm very interested to see how you do at a tournament with it, and let us know in the comments. We're going to move on to the main topic for today, which is Thranduil's Halls list. Evan, I know you have a couple of them. If you want to go over your first one. I know I think he said 800 points. So do you have, what kind of, is it all allied, or do you have a pure one, or?
So I have no pure lists.
No pure lists. Okay. So you go with whatever you want then.
Yeah. So first off, I know that a lot of people have been asking for us to show the lists we make on the actual Zoom call for YouTube. The problem is they aren't digital. None of the lists we make really are digital, so we can't screen share them.
Yeah, let's be honest. We write all of these 20 minutes before each episode.
Exactly. So it's hard to really show them. We'll do what we can to describe them.
Yeah, it is a good time to say also too, all of us have full-time jobs or student, and we're all pretty busy too. So we apologize if any of it doesn't happen.
Yeah, so first, I guess let's dip our toes into Thranduil's Halls. I'm going to go with a Yellow Alliance first off, which I'd say is probably the list with the least amount of Thranduil's Halls components in it. So this is more of an example of how you could drop in a warband of Thranduil's Halls. So in warband number 1, there's Aragorn, King Alisar on Armored Horse. He's got 2 Knights of Minas Tirith, 6 Rangers with spears, 2 Warriors of Minas Tirith with spears, 8 Warriors of Minas Tirith with spears and shields. Warband 2, Legolas Greenleaf on horse, 5 Mirkwood Elves with bows and glaives, 9 Mirkwood Elves with shields, and then in Warband number 3 is Galadriel, Lady of Light. So all in all, this is not a large list. It's got 35 models, which I know for some people is a little low. For me, it's usually okay, especially seeing as you have Aragorn, King Alisar, who's going to be doing a ton of damage. The list, obviously, it's going to be winning a lot of combats. It's got Fight 5. It's got the 6-inch banner from Aragorn. It's got Defense 6 on basically all of its models. It's protected from magic with Galadriel. It's got great shooting. It's got 11 bows plus Legolas, so it's going to be basically out shooting everything. And I mean, yeah, that's the list. So basically, what I want to cover most with this list is we've all seen lists with Aragorn, King Alisar, and Galadriel, Lady of Light. But I want to really talk about how the Legolas Greenleaf Warband contributes to this list and sort of brings it over the top almost. First off, I'd say if you're thinking about maybe allying one warband of Thranduil's Halls into your list, the best option to do that with is Legolas on horse. He's a hero of valor. He's nice and cheap, so you can lead more guys with him. And he's extremely powerful because he's got his ability to shoot out horses and even some opposing heroes like Círdan's or maybe even Súladán's or Spider Queens sometimes. And he also brings the Mirkwood Elves, which provide Fight 5, Defense 6, all the good stuff that elves provide. And you don't have to take him just with Gondor and Galadriel or something like that. You can ally this into basically any list because Thranduil's Halls is convenient allies with, I'm fairly sure, every single good army. So you could take them with dwarves, not even like the Iron Hills. You can take them with Khazad-dûm. You can take them with Rohan. You can take them with fiefdoms. You can really do whatever you want with them. And that's sort of the beauty of allying in that warband.
Yeah, I think your allies matrix is used perfectly. And it kind of goes back to our Gundabad conversation. Think of it, Evan just made a list that had the same amount numbers, but it's good against magic, good against shooting, and is higher defense, higher fight, everything. Like, yeah, but I would say like it's a really, really good list. I wouldn't even be worried about the numbers, actually. I'm always the one to be like numbers, numbers, numbers.
Mhm.
I think with all the tools that you have, Aragorn in the pocket, Galadriel blocking everything in such high fight, and the shooting, I think that's a pretty balanced list. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it. It's
I
really
mean, the
good.
dream really in most people's lists is to be able to take Elisar and not have to worry about anything else, right? So you take Elisar and you just want him to kill things, kill things, kill things. But you know, people try to use magic on him, or people and with him being able to resist magic basically to a point. And Paul's, you know, 3 point of might, you know, plus he's got doesn't need more than a 4 to wound things on a horse. I mean, now with the new edition, well, let me ask you this. So, because and I'll ask Evan this because I know you probably know this better than I do because I'm still getting used to the new rule. Can you fortify spirit the horse, or can you only do the model?
So here's how it works. Fortify Spirit affects the entire model, and so basically you can roll it for the horse. Say if you Black Dart the horse, you can roll the 2 dice for Fortify Spirit. You cannot might it, however.
Okay.
But remember, Aragorn is Horse Lord, so he's got 3 fate.
Okay. Yep.
So he can use it on the horse. Often if you go up against like 2 spellcasters, say Witch King and the Shadow Lord, or Angmar with Barrow Wights and the Witch King or something like that, Galadriel can just channel Fortify Spirit, and you have 2 dice needing a maximum of 5s, which is a 55% chance, even against if the opponent rolls a 6 on their casting roll. So
Yeah,
I would not expect to see somebody try and Black Dart Aragorn's horse unless like they have literally nothing else to do against your army. So I honestly don't think it's a concern.
And it's
you
a
have
great point
you have
too.
the might to channel it too. Like you got 9 might and one for each turn. I just feel like Galadriel Lady of Light fixes everything.
But what's great about it as well is you get this combination of Aragorn fights like the troops / big heroes, and if he needs help, boom, Legolas shoots them off their horse, or Legolas, you know, if they're on a fell beast, Legolas tries to shoot them off while being banished, and so you can pretty much cover anything hero wise, because ring wraith, they don't care because you can banish them and you can shoot them just straight up. Big heroes, you can shoot their horses off, and Galadriel will make it so other casters can't really do anything on him. And again, if you were to come up against an Angmar list, it's a perfect point to channel, because then basically the whole point of that army is to make it difficult for him. But he just goes, no, I'm going to charge every turn and I'm going to kill things. And Barrow Wights don't mean anything to me. And it's just phenomenal what that combination of those 3 heroes do. And like you said, was it 35 models total, Evan?
Yes, 35.
So it's the same thing that we were going against, but you have fight 5 in there as well with a banner, a 6-inch banner. So you can really fight off almost everything and still do well while your heroes go, you know, Galadriel Lady of Light, you put her into troops and you have her, you know, kill them because she is fight 6 with 3 attacks at strength 4, and Legolas just does his shooting, and you know, it can do a lot of damage. I really like this list. Big fan of it.
Yeah. So a reminder as well with this list, sometimes with the small lists, you can struggle really due to lack of mobility. You can't get where you need to get to. But with this list, you can just call a heroic march every single turn. Yep. And there's also 2 Knights of Minas Tirith in there. So if you need flankers or anything like that, you have a couple of cavalry models in there if you need to. And I mean, it's crazy. I think I've played this list 2 to 3 times, and every single time I've played it, it's been in Reconnoiter. That's just how the luck of the draw was. And I drew a game of Reconnoiter against like a 50-60 model Mordor army, and I managed to win a game of Reconnoiter against like a 45 model Fiefdoms army, just because the army was so fast, because it was marching every single turn. And it can really do well.
So let me ask before we move on to Rainier's list. So you said you've tried it a couple times. How does, on a scale of 1 to 10, how does this rank in your, like, if you were to go to a tournament, would you consider taking this list to try to win, or is it not really there yet?
I would absolutely consider taking this. I'd probably give it like 8 to 9.
Okay.
I'd say. Obviously, it would be nice if it had like 40 models. I think 40 models is about right for this sort of type of list at 800 points. So it's a little on the small side, which can be problematic in some certain scenarios. But other than that, I'd really rank it highly.
Okay, so if you're looking to play as LSR list, maybe consider taking that. Rainier, if you want to go over your list real quick.
Okay, so I have a 700 point. I wanted to go lower because I assume like a lot of y'all would do 800. I have a 700 point pure list. It's pretty themed. It's just Thranduil and Legless, so it's like father and son. But to go over it, I have Thranduil on Elk, and he's fully kitted. He's got Elk heavy armor.
Rainier, I'm going to interrupt you real quick because you weren't here last week. Now we had a debate, and you can get into that real quick. Are you? Because I may have made a mistake here. I said you were not pro horse or elk. I said you were pro. Are you pro elk, horse, or on foot for Thranduil?
You actually had that correct. You said I was pro on foot, right?
I think so. I think I said you were pro elk. I think I said you were pro elk. So I may have been wrong.
I put him on elk today. I think it all depends on the point system, to be honest. If I have 800 points, I'm kind of like trying to save the points to throw more things into it. So I'd probably put him on a horse. But today at 700, I put him on an elk. And back to our talk about what's his face, Azog, why I always choose Azog over Bolg. Just he's like unstoppable. I feel like Thranduil is the same on an elk. He's you can stop him, but like that's one terrifying model to like come across.
So we always talk about 800 points though, right? At 800 points, are you taking him on foot or are you taking him on elk or horse?
It depends on the army, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you ally him with
so I guess it depends on the army. What are you? Because we all did this last episode. I'm gonna make you make an answer. If you were inclined to pick, you had to pick one of the three as a general statement for the most part.
Shoot.
It's a tough one because basically, did you listen to last week's episode?
I did not actually.
Okay, so basically, everybody besides Matt set on foot, and Matt set on elk. So maybe I wrongfully said that you picked elk because I thought I remembered a conversation about that. But are you horse, elk, or foot as a general rule?
Well, before I do choose, I want to say, like, as I was making lists, I put him on foot. But that said, I would say elk.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say elk just because he's so dangerous. Even his circlet, his like magic extends because the base is bigger. And I'm back to, maybe it's because what I play a lot of like Horde elite armies with like spattered, and like with those armies, there's nothing that can take him on an elk, if that makes sense. My crossbows can't shoot him down. My captains can't really stop him. You just can't escape. He just comes after you. So that's why I would say it on an elk, just personally. And I put him on elk for this one too, because I was like, why not?
Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but we had just talked about that, and you mentioned him on elk, and I thought, okay, well, we didn't have you last episode to talk about that, so I thought it'd be good to get your opinion on this, but go ahead.
And that said, I'm not like hard, like he has to be on elk. Like I said, like some lists you'll want to put him on foot because it's a waste of points to put him on elk. Some lists you want to put him on a horse because 10 points to like make him like be a rocket for a turn or two, like that's good enough. But yeah, so I got him. He's fully kitted, heavy armor, Circuit of Kings, bow. I did put a bow on him. Elf blade and an extra elf blade and an elk. So he's just fully kitted for 200 points. He's leading a warband with 10 shield elves, 2 horses. Horses are going to be with him. 4 of the guards with shield and spear, 2 glaives, and 1 banner on the glaive. After him is a warband with Legolas on horse. And he has 2 horse as well, 6 bow and 4 shield and 2 glaive. So it's a cookie cutter list, to be honest. It's 700 points, 34 models, Thranduil and Legolas, only 6 might. The gist of it is I actually have quite a lot of cav, which I think I wanted to put in. I feel like a lot of people overlook in this list. Cav accompanying Thranduil, even legless on horse, make for really good combat synergies, I feel. And flanking because you'll have a battle line that's really, really good. I think the flanking happens with the horses or even objective. 16 points for a horse is not bad for an elf, but it is expensive.
Plus the 6-inch
yeah.
banner for Thranduil to give them,
Yeah.
you know, that's always a huge plus for him to have a 6-inch banner for those guys.
Yeah, and fight 5 horses like going along with him. And then if you have him, don't they get +1 to wound also?
If they're within so actually, does it say Mirkwood Cav, Evan? Do you remember?
Yes.
They get
Cav are within 3 inches of him.
Yeah, so he +1 to wound plus, so they get the lance bonus plus
lance bonus.
And that's and keep in mind that's not if you charge. That's just simply if you're within 3 inches. So even if they don't charge that 1 dice, they still get that +1 to wound.
Yeah, and that's one of the like biggest weaknesses of Cav, even like heavy infantry or heavy armor Cav. The pushback, it's like you're just there like fighting, hoping you'll get another charge off. They're going to be killing stuff even on the counter charge, I feel. So that's what I wanted to like highlight horses in the list. Of course, I don't have March. Obvious weakness right there. But for 700 points, maybe I'll get shot the crap at a tournament. But I do like the synergy of Thranduil with the Cav, even the Fountain Court Guard. If Thranduil gets knocked off or decides to go off his thing, Palace Guard. Palace Guard. Sorry, Palace Guard can go wherever. They're fight 6. The banner's in there. I have some shooting with Legolas and bows. I'm not going to keep them like in reserve shooting, like they're going to go with the army. But like there's enough to pick off certain things. And yeah, surprisingly at 700 point, I think it can do well. I wouldn't rank it super high. I'd probably rank it at a 7.5. But I think when some of the things click, it can throw the opponent off guard. And those things that click are the horse. And I guess 34 models with like the majority defense 5 to 6 isn't too bad. But yeah.
You have 11 bows?
I play really aggressive. I have 6 bows, Legolas, and Thranduil.
Okay, so you could have a potential of 10 shots. So it's still
yeah,
an okay amount of bows.
It's fun. I think it'd be fun. It'd be something that I'd try to paint to try to compete in like best painted or like something. But yeah, I kind of like it. If like the battle lines hit right away, I think it has quite a lot of potential. And I even like the idea of Legolas on horse for combat. I think he can actually play a semi Huron role in this army with him with some Cav kind of like heroic combating or just like going and knocking stuff over to kill it. Of course, he doesn't have Burly, but he has the potential, and he's fight 6 also. That's no slouch in a combat. So yeah.
Yeah, this is the premier example of the Thranduil's Hall's Death Ball list, where you take it, you throw it into the biggest part of your opponent's battle line, and you just watch it absolutely crumple. You put Thranduil in the middle, you take like 3 guys on each side, and you use them, you put the Palace Guard spear supports behind them, and then you put the banner there as well, and then you have a fight 6, 2 ranks of guys with a banner behind them with +1 to wound, and you can go up against like a dwarf army with defense 7 and high strength and just cut them to ribbons. It's absolutely crazy how much damage these guys can do. And honestly, they're great against hordes as well. Not the best because they're a little small, but because of the circlet of kings, they're not going to get surrounded very much, and you can really do a lot of damage with them. So this is definitely less, I guess I'd say, well-rounded than maybe some of the other lists we're going to cover today. It doesn't have a ridiculous amount of shooting, because I'm fairly sure you don't have max bows, right, Rainier? You've got like 6 plus Thranduil and Legolas. Yeah. So it's not going to outshoot everything. 34 models is okay. How many horsey guys do you have?
I've got 6 if you include the heroes.
Yeah. So that's not bad. No heroic march. So that's always a problem. There is, if I was going competitive, there is one thing I would change, but I think I'll cover that as I go over the next list. But I mean, I like it. It hits super hard. It's got Legolas. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, I like. I mean, there's not much I can really say after what Evan said. I mean, it's pretty much exactly almost what I would say. Remind me how many cav you had again? I'm sorry, was it 4?
I've got 4 cav, 2 in each
Okay.
warband, and then the elk and Legolas. So 6.
Yeah. Okay, so you got. I mean, you really, if you wanted to hit one flank, you could really hit one flank. And I mean, if you got all 4 of them on like 2 guys each, plus Legolas and Thranduil, I mean, you could take out a warband in one swipe, like it's nobody's business. I mean, you could do a ton. You could just move from like one side and kind of like move over with them if you wanted. But and plus the terror. I mean, I think
I feel outside of shooting armies, it works well at 700 points because of that. You're going to see a lot of mid 85 to 75 point heroes that Thranduil can like piecemeal, or you're going to see a lot of hordes that kind of aren't going to be able to counter it, but like shooting bing bing.
And I obviously everyone tries to get terror into their army, but I think it can't be understated enough when you kind of have that small of an army where you kind of have like 30, was it 34 models total?
Mm-hmm.
You can get pretty close to fitting everybody in that terror bubble. And when everybody's in the terror bubble and everybody has to take a courage test to charge, it can be quite an annoyance knowing that the elves are going to get to charge you, and that's when you're in trouble, is when they get to choose their fights with a banner. I mean, that is not, and then they get +1 to wound as well. I mean, that is not a pleasant thing to go against. I apologize. And Thranduil could use a Circlet of Kings to knock everyone down, charge everyone in, and just devastate you in one turn.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the might doesn't bother me as much, or even the notion of, sweet, I'm going to heroic combat with both Legolas and Thranduil in this turn. Oh no, I'm like down to 4 might. Like the army doesn't need it too much once it's combat.
Yeah, that's my Does anyone have any final thoughts, or we'll move on to Evan's second list? So, Evan, if you want to go over that.
Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to do with this one is create sort of like a very traditional Battle of the 5 Armies style list. So this is going to be majority elves, a little bit of survivors of Laketown in there, and a single dwarf, actually, and I'll cover why I used that dwarf when I do. So first off, actually, the first part of the list is very similar to Rainier's 700 point list. So we've got Thranduil, King of the Woodland Realm. I personally am not a huge fan of the elk, so I didn't take him on the elk, but he's got the blades, he's got the Circlet of Kings, and he's got the heavy armor. In his warband, there's 2 Mirkwood Cavalry, 8 Mirkwood Elves with shields, 1 Mirkwood Elf with glaive, shield, and banner, 3 Palace Guard with spears and shields. In Legolas's warband, there's 8 Mirkwood Elves with elf bow. And the Legolas is there on horse as well. And now moving on to the allies. The first ally I took is the Laketown Militia Captain, and I think we can probably have a discussion about this guy in a bit, because he seems to pop up in a lot of Thranduil's Halls lists. And he's got 8 Laketown Militia with spears and shields, 4 Laketown Militia with spears and bows, and in the final warband is Thorin Oakenshield, King Under the Mountain, on Wargoat. So this is 800 points, 38 models, 11 might points, 2 pretty big heroes with Thranduil and Thorin. It's got Legolas in there as well with his shooting on horse. And I think something we probably want to discuss a bit more, the Laketown Militia Captain with a warband of Laketown Militia. So I am going to make the argument that in most cases, when you're trying to make a pure Thranduil's Halls list, you are probably going to benefit immensely just by allying in a warband of survivors of Laketown with the Laketown Militia Captain and 12 Laketown Militia, because it does 2 things. One, it boosts your numbers. which is always handy, especially in elf list, because it gives you extra spear supports that you can put behind your defense 6, fight 5 elves. And also it gives you the militia captain, who has 2 extra might points and heroic march, which unless you're taking, say, a palace guard captain in the Thranduil's Halls list, you're not getting heroic march. So that was actually my criticism of Rainier's list, was that I feel in that particular list, it would really benefit from maybe dropping a couple of the Mirkwood Cavalry down to normal elves, maybe dropping some of the normal elves, and taking a militia captain with a warband of Laketown militia to beef up your numbers just a little bit, give you that heroic march so you can get where you need to go, and then have those extra might points as well, just in case you say need a heroic move and you want your elk, your Thranduil on elk to be able to charge. I'd say that would be a worthwhile inclusion. But overall, I'd say this is probably one of the most competitive ways to run Thranduil's Halls at 800 points. You've got probably one of the silliest heroes in the game, being Thorin, King Under the Mountain, who's 125 points, 3 attacks, strength 4, fight 6, and gets free heroic combats, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's got the march from the captain and Legolas and Thranduil. So that's the list.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just one of those lists where you have 3 major heroes. Well, let's be honest. You have 3 major heroes, which I think most people try to do. They try to have the big 3 plus the numbers plus the support cast kind of a thing. So you have the might specifically to be used for marches or moves, which is always great when a model is just being used for that exact reason, right? Where you know that you don't have to waste a might on Thranduil to call a move because you've got the Laketown captain to do it. Or, maybe Legolas calls it because he's just sitting back. So Thranduil and Thorin can straight up just use their might for the most part for killing, striking, or just winning things. Like that's fantastic. And like you said, Thorin, for his points, is just unbelievable. I mean, the ability to do what he does it's one of the best profiles for its points. It really is. It's a fantastic model. You have the numbers, of course. You have the fight 5, and you have the support cast. Yeah, it's a very good list.
Yeah, I think it represents the perfect synergy of allying in all the key components of all 3 of them. You get one of the cheapest marches in the captain with super underpriced points with those guys in that warband. You get underpriced Thorin for his points, who's going to destroy troops and even go toe to toe with many heroes. You have Thranduil. It's just a really good list. It kind of reminds me of, who was it that got second at Articon? Callum, I think. It kind of reminds me of his list that he took to last Articon, where he kind of had this similar synergy. And then another person that I know, Samir, plays this type of synergy too. It's really good, just really cost effective. Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those lists where you don't really have to say that much about it, really. It's just a good list to kind of go over. So we'll go over this list. I have an 800 point list. I'm now noticing I could add 2 more bows into this. So keep in mind, you could change 2 of these guys up for bows if you want. But I'm just going to read it as is, because I think I'd have to fool around with it. But you could add 2 more bows in this. But it's an 800 point pure list. And I would say that this is kind of like a cookie cutter. I think most people would kind of build it this way. But let me know, Evan and Rainier, if you would change anything about it, because I'd be interested to hear any changes you'd have as well. But 800 points. It has Thranduil, heavy armor, Circlet of Kings, Elven Made Sword, 170 point on foot guy. I prefer him on foot just because I think to always get that benefit. Evan made a good point on the last episode where if you charge in on the elk or on horse, you get 5 attacks anyway. So why not just charge him in and get 5 attacks regardless, and he'll kill both anyway. So the horse takes up more space and kind of. So I agree with him. So I think you use him on foot personally. I have 4 Palace Guard with spear and shields. I have 2 Mirkwood elves with shields and glaives. I have 2 Mirkwood cavalry with shields. 4 Mirkwood elves with shield, and 2 Mirkwood elves with bows and glaives. I have Legolas on horse, 4 Mirkwood elves with shield, 2 Mirkwood elves with bow, 2 Mirkwood elves with bows and glaives, 3 Mirkwood elves with shields and glaives, and 1 Mirkwood elf with shield, glaive, and banner. And then I have a Palace Guard captain with shield, 3 Mirkwood elves with shields, 1 Mirkwood elf with bow, 2 Mirkwood elves with bows and glaives, and 3 Mirkwood elves with glaive and shield. So 38 models. You've got 2 cavalry models to kind of go where they need to go and do a little bit of damage with Thranduil. You have 4 Palace Guard to try to help with the fight 6 and anywhere that you need to, counter a hero. 9 bows, not including Thranduil or I didn't include bow on Thranduil in my description, but he has a bow. So Thranduil has a bow, Legolas has a bow. So in theory, you could have anywhere from if you add the 2 bows into the list, like I said earlier, you could have in theory up to 15 shots that turn. As is, you would have up to 13 shots. But you have I went with shield and glaive to keep the defense 6. I think I had the points and I wanted to keep a pure D6 front and back rank so you don't target the back rank to kind of get screwed in that regard from shooting. And also I added glaives to the bows to the back rank of the bows, so then my front rank can attack, my back rank can support. So if they get they're able to both shoot and fight in combat. And then if a bow got into a situation in which it was, let's say, 2-on-1, it can now shield and prolong the game, I guess, until something's able to go over and help it. It's 38 models, up to 13 shots, possible 15. Palace Guard Captain, of course, is fight 7 around Thranduil and gets +1 to wound. Has Heroic March as well, so you have 8 might. That's my list, but interesting to hear what you guys think about it.
I don't think I can critique your list so much as like Mirkwood Pure at 800, if that makes sense. So I think the one thing that sticks out is, and you can't fix it, you're going for defense 6 and you really want to like make sure like you can serve your troops, but just 12 points a pop, whether it's glaive and bow or glaive and shield, I think it is, like that's just so expensive.
The problem is like the bowmen with glaive are 13 points. They are very expensive models. Yeah. And so, obviously if I took them with bow, they're 11 points, but I like the idea of being able to support my other bows. And if they get into a situation where they're caught by themselves, they can just shield like the Wood Elf spears in Lothlorien and just kind of stay alive until I can get someone to help them out.
Yeah, and that is good. And I also like your inclusion of the captain. A lot of people do Tauriel, but I actually really like the Palace Guard captain. The Palace Guard captain can be fight 7 around Thranduil also. So I do like that aspect of it. I just think at 8, we're always comparing. Whenever we have a list that's 800, we're just comparing it to other highly competitive lists at 800. I think the only killing power is Thranduil. And even with shielding, like, I don't know, like that's one rule, that's shielding. It's like stopping from dying, but the list itself isn't really killing at a high rate.
So you have two cavalry if they don't need to go get objectives that can kind of do a little bit of damage. They jump in and they kill maybe 4 models if they're lucky enough with the +1, and then you have a banner to help out with winning fights, and then anybody within 3 inches of Thranduil will obviously get the +1 to wound. So that could do a little bit of damage right there. I agree with you that there's not a ton of threats, but I think there's more damage than you may think there is. But
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I did like the 700 point list of it basically, and it is really good. It's just so hard when they have access to Thranduil to not pop him. It's so hard when they have like you threw the captain, I assume, for the march, right? Like
well,
it's
it
so
was
hard.
the March and it's a fight 7 hero. So it's
Yeah.
like a combination of like somebody has to strike against him basically to kill a captain, which is just kind of crazy. And he gets +1 to wounds and he gives the March. So he's just too good to not take.
Yeah, it is good. And I can see someone actually like doing pretty good with it in that list particular too. Cause like we think like, oh, 38's low, but like they're all elves. This is not a low for 38 models, all
Well,
fight
it's an all
5 to 7.
D6.
Like that's
the other thing. It's
yeah,
not
that's
like there's
really
like
good.
besides the bowmen who are D5, it's a D6 wall, and then even the D5 have spear supports from their bowmen.
Yeah.
So they can basically go front rank, back rank as well. So
and you could like compare it to Rivendell lists where Thranduil arguably does more output than all their mega heroes in killing troops. And he basically has like a Kurdan special rules. Like within him, that's cast on a 6 automatically, the majority. So it's like, I do like that. And I think I'm glad both you and I did a pure list because I think, yeah, they have access to Alliance so much, but like just think of a pure list, like the potential it can actually be quite a solid list. Like we both use the phrase cookie cutter, but like even the cookie cutter list is like pretty good. Like try it. Like it's going to be hard to break through. And it's going to be hard to, Thranduil is going to like hunt stuff down and whatnot. Like I do like it in that aspect. It's just so hard when it's just easy to ally with everything. But yeah.
Yeah, so I've played a list like this once, and I think it's just because of bad luck, but I've only played the Palace Guard captain once, and the one time I played him, turn 1, he got hit by a catapult, rolled a 1 on his fate save, and died. So perhaps I'm a little biased when I say I usually prefer to take the Laketown militia captain over him, but when you're doing a pure list with Thranduil's halls, you probably want to take this guy because he's your only way to get heroic march. And you really want heroic march in this style of list because it excels at going up against your opponent's shield wall and grinding it down. And if you can't get to your opponent's shield wall, then you're basically screwed. So I'd say if you want to make like a competitive Thranduil's Halls list, either Palace Guard captain or Laketown militia captain are pretty essential to the list because they allow you to get where you need to go.
I want to just throw this forward as well. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole list, but there was a list I also considered, which I'm gonna mention this because I think he deserves credit because I basically stole this from him. Jacob Hall had taken a Thranduil's Halls list and basically got 45 models out of it. And essentially you take front rank, back rank, that's it. There's no bows. And you end up with Thranduil, Legolas, and Palace Guard Captain. And you get 42 elves and you get the 3 heroes, so you get 45 models. And because it's just front rank, back rank, D6, yes, you don't have bows, but it's just to fight off 42 defense 6 elves, it's just a hard thing to do. Like when I talk about Lothlorien, when we did that, I mentioned how because I go up against elves all the time, it becomes a real pain in the butt to deal with a horde elf list. So I think if you're able to take Thranduil, Legolas, and a Palace Guard captain plus 42 elves, I think that's something to consider at 800 points because it's a lot to get through at that many points with let's say a 2-hour tournament because there's just so much to. I mean, maybe you pretty much everything besides heroes. This thing is going to win against when you think about it, especially with that many models as well. But interested to hear just a quick thought on the concept of 42 front rank, back rank elves at D6.
I did see that list at a tournament, and the majority of them were shield and sword. So I think that was like a semi weakness, I would say, against like a traditional.
Well, no, this one is front rank, back rank. So you have
front rank, back rank.
Yeah, so you have 21 with shield, 21 with I think it was 21 with glaive and shield.
I think it's pretty good. I think it represents, I guess.
I'm sorry,
American
just
meta.
glaive. Sorry, no shields. The back rank would be defense 5.
I think it semi represents the way American meta has kind of formed, to where we're like, let's not find something to balance it. Let's lean further into our strength, which is, I'm kind of glad you bring it up. And I always like talking about it, but like, I think that's good in the sense, like, it's like, could I bring more shooting, or could I bring more something else to balance it? Could I ally in something? No, like, I'm just gonna go pure big and just play this play style. So I like it in that sense.
And again, we're mostly, when we talk, I need people to understand, when we talk, we're mostly speaking of the US meta, because we play in the US. So things could be different where you play, where, if you tried to run 42 elves, maybe you get slaughtered for whatever the reason. Maybe somebody has something that counters that perfectly. But just for anyone who doesn't, I play elves, not recently due to COVID, but before that, I played elves near enough every single week. And I always hated when there were a lot of elves, because the problem with elves is usually they're expensive. But when they're not expensive, when you're just taking them for numbers, it just becomes a real pain in the butt. And then when you combine that with, you have Legolas, you have Thranduil, and the Palace Guard Captain to kind of deal with other heroes as well. 45 models for elves is pretty high for front rank, back rank to just march forward and go.
And then you're not worrying about, oh shoot, are my elves killing things?
Yeah.
When you have elves outnumbering like
they're
going to kill things.
If I'm going against, let's say, dwarves, like let's say Iron Hills, right? Yeah, they're defense 8, but with my +1 from Thranduil, and me probably having the numbers advantage, maybe I'm getting 3 guys on there too.
And the fight advantage.
I don't really care that much at that point, right? And then I encourage 5, so I can pretty much charge anything. And I'm fight 5. I have Elven blades on everything. I'm winning a lot of these fights, and people don't seem to understand that.
And like 45 models to where you can't heroic combat through that.
No, you really can't. Is the big thing.
Like that's what kind of kicks me, because you could toss a model here or there, make it fight 6. And then you have the likes of Boromir, Aragorn, like they just can't heroic combat through that. And in the meantime, the death bubble is just killing everything. And then also, like, they're all terrifying.
And again, you could probably downgrade maybe 2 models, make it 40 models, and maybe add a couple Palace Guard in there to give that, fight. And then you're 43 models, and then maybe you have like 2 or 3 Palace Guard to help out with
selective fight 6,
and then you can kind of counter heroes as well. But the concept is you get that 42 model infantry with the 3 heroes. And to be fair, you could even downgrade Thranduil to maybe where he doesn't have the Circlet of Kings, maybe add in 3 more troops. And then you have, 48 models at that point. And it's just, I mean, can you imagine fighting 48 elves plus Thranduil with his blades and Legolas and a Palace Guard
and
captain?
absolutely everything can shield.
Yeah, everything can shield. Everything is fight 7, fight 6, fight whatever. I just think that'd be such an annoyance to go against.
I think it's good, and I think it's proven. Like, we're talking about this strange, like, super cookie cutter meta. Sometimes in America, we do play, the Iversons play like a lot of like intense things and stuff, but it's proven too. Like at last Articon that we played, like we placed 3rd and 7 with a pure list and historic alliance, going heavy on a strength and having a huge glaring weakness in our armies. Like it has the potential.
What I'll say before we move on to Evan's last list. If I were to take this Thranduil's Halls, if I were to take Rivendell, if I were to take, let's say, Lothlorien, I personally at a tournament am taking this kind of list where I have so many elves that you almost kind of go, well, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like the heroes are, because we forget that Thranduil without the circlet, because everybody always likes to include it, because who doesn't want terror? Who doesn't want the Nature's Wrath? But Nature's Wrath has been downgraded to 3 inches. And even though the terror is great, the elves don't really need it that much at that kind of number. So to add, 3 extra, I'd rather have 3 extra models. And then at that point, I'm getting to the 45, 46, 47 model range where you're almost at a Horde Mordor list at that point. And if I asked you, would you rather have 47, Mordor list or a 47 elf list with Thranduil still having his blade attack ability? I think I'd rather have the elves, but that's just me personally. So unless anybody has any other points on that, Evan, you can go into your last list.
So speaking of a large number of models that's going to win a lot of fights, I decided to go with something a little different that I usually don't take. So I've got Thranduil on foot with the swords, with the circlet, with the armor. We all know what he does. 2 Mirkwood Cavalry. There is also 14 Mirkwood Elves with shields, 2 Palace Guards with shields. Then from Survivors of Laketown, Bard the Bowman on horse with the armor, Alfred, Sigrid, and Tilda. 10 Laketown Militia with spears and shields, 5 Laketown Militia with spears and bows. Then in Warband number 3 is a Laketown Militia Captain, 8 Laketown Militia with spears and shields, 4 Laketown Militia with spears and bows. So here's how this list works. It's got 51 models in total. It's got a front line of 16 Mirkwood Elves and some Palace Guard. Well, 14 Mirkwood Elves, 2 Palace Guard with shields, defense 6, fight 5. You've got some Mirkwood Cavalry as well to move around. And then you've got all of your Laketown Militia spear supports who are all going to be in range of the 12-inch banner from Bard. So in every single fight, you're going to be rolling 2 dice with a banner reroll at fight 5 with the Elven Blade with the defense 6. And on top of that, you've got 2 hard-hitting heroes being Thranduil and Bard, and a Laketown Militia Captain for heroic marches and heroic moves. So that's it. Rainier, you're muted.
You said it's 51 models?
51.
51, and you have how many elves?
18 in total. 2 Mirkwood Cav, and then 16 shield guys.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, it's the Horde aspect. You're sprinkled fight 5 all over the battlefield, so you're not just like have it in one position. I like it a lot. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty good. Although I don't know, I've played 45 to 50 like lists that have a lot of Laketown Guard or Laketown Militia in it. And like I would say the one weakness, of course, I would say would be probably elite hordes might do pretty good against it, and shooting like I'm just thinking Corsairs might do well, but I think it's a well-balanced list. It'd do really good at a tournament. I think it would win most games at like a 5 or 6 game tournament. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to say. Like you covered it all. It's really good at the objective game. 2 heavy hitters. The shooting is going to be good. The synergy is good. The heroic marches is good. Like it's pretty good.
I wonder because I've always thought about doing front rank, back rank with militia and Thranduil Halls. Now, tell me why, because I'm just curious because I go back and forth with this. Tell me why you put elves in front instead of elves behind. Just based on your opinion, why not? Because I get the defense 6 in the front, of course, but if that elf then dies, then you only have a Laketown Militia to fight. So do you find that the defense 6 is better, or because is it the cost of the elf? What is your reason for elves in front instead of elves in back?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of things, right? Mirkwood Elves, obviously, you've already pointed out the defense 6, super valuable, especially in a metagame with a whole bunch of strength 3 hordes. And I definitely say this is, I'd say, a really good horde breaker, actually, counter to sort of what Rainier said about Corsairs. If I went up against a Corsair list with this list, I really wouldn't be concerned at all, because I've got Heroic March, I've got shields on basically all of my Laketown Militia, except the Bowmen, so they're decently resistant to crossbows and throwing weapons and strength 2 bows and whatnot. And when I get into combat, doing a whole bunch of damage with Bard and Thranduil, I've got my defense 6, fight 5, and they'll just tear through any Horde model. And I've also got the Circlet of Kings, so it's going to be very hard to charge my guys. And I guess sort of going back on that whole Laketown militia or elf point, glaives are very points inefficient because you could just be taking a spear and shield. So I will almost always have my Mirkwood elf have a shield instead of a glaive, because not only do they get that better points efficiency with the shield, they also have courage 5. So if my opponent has a terror army, my Laketown militia are going to be courage 3, maybe courage 2 with the Harbinger of Evil, but my elves are going to be courage 5 or courage 4, and they're just going to charge right in. So that was the philosophy behind it.
Okay,
Yeah,
no,
I kind of like the shields, to be honest, too, because what is that, 10 points? Like, that's really cost efficient for, like you said, but like, let's compare that just to the Mirkwood army. Like, that's like, what is that, like the cheapest model you can bring in a Merc in this list?
Yeah, I think it's 10 points.
And it's defense 6 with fight 5 and the ability to shield. Like, I see where you're going with that, and I probably would have done the same.
See, and it was interesting because I go back, like I said, I go back and forth with this. I actually think I'm now swayed towards Evan's opinion because I forget about the courage 5 in the front, and I think that needs to be said, because even though the militia are more sacrificial to be in the front, it is better to have that D6 plus the courage 5, and they're cheaper. So I think Evan has now swayed me to where I would definitely go with elves in front instead of elves behind. So yeah, I'm more of a fan. Plus, what'd you say? You had 54 models?
51.
51. I mean, maybe if I took the list I just talked about, where I had like 48 models, I wouldn't be scared. But I think near enough any other list where I didn't have a ton of elves, you know what I mean? I would be very scared of this list. I would not want to play this list. It would not, because like he said, he gets a banner reroll on one of the dice every single time. Now, there might be that weird annoyance where the higher dice is the number, but more than likely, if you're banner rerolling, it's because you have the lower numbers anyway. So that doesn't really matter. So it would be a very frustrating thing to go against this list personally.
Yeah, I think it would balance itself in most metas, unless you came across something like the Belrog, the Watcher, and a Drake or some random
even then,
smash of monsters.
You imagine getting a couple of elves on the Balrog, right? And maybe you strike up, you get to 10 with the Elven Blade, you win, and then you have a bunch of elves in the front, two-handed, getting +1 to wound against. If you had, let's say, 6 or 7, and you trapped him, you imagine 12 dice getting +1 to wound. I mean, on the Balrog, plus you'd have your heroes. You could do a ton of damage to the Balrog, that kind of situation, because of that the Elven Blade for free is so good on these guys. I think that doesn't get stated enough how good that Elven Blade is. But
it's a good proper horde.
I think that's probably about it for this episode. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like for us to go over in future episodes. Any lists, please leave those as well. We might do another Q&A. Please let us know if you enjoy the Q&As. We don't mind doing them. I think for the most part we enjoy them, but we only want to do them if you guys want them. So please let us know if you do like the Q&As, because we may do another one coming up shortly. If not, we'll see you next episode.